And we are back. It is, what are we headed into? Week 14? That puts us
Yep.
dangerously close to the end of the regular season. We'll still have some playoff content, but we are creeping up towards the end. Brady, how did week 13 treat you?
I mean, pretty good. I mean, I got off of that Derrick Henry chalk and played Devontae Adams instead. Was really close to a takedown, but Austin Eckler and the Chargers just spoiled my dreams there. But I got a top five. Can't really complain. Small profit on the week, but man, I was so close. Just needed Austin Eckler to get a couple more receptions.
Yeah, that game was like, that was just one of the weirdest games, period, given how badly. I mean, I don't know if I've ever, like, not ever. I don't know if this season, I think it was the worst margin of defeat this season as far as I can remember. It was like, it was worse than like the 0-16 Lions and Browns, too. I don't think either of them got beat that badly at any point. I checked one of them and it wasn't. And somehow Anthony Lynn still has a job, which is just like, I don't even. I can't begin to explain how that works. So let's hop into it. Let's hop into the main slate. We've got the first game is a good one, actually. I've just got these in kind of a random order, but it's the Kansas City Chiefs versus the Miami Dolphins. Miami Dolphins right now, 7.5-point dogs. No surprise versus the Chiefs, and a 49.5-point total. I think, as always, the Chiefs are kind of obvious. I think if you can get up to the Chiefs in terms of price, there's really no reason not to. Like, we should reasonably project Patrick Mahomes to lead the slate in scoring in terms of quarterbacks, in terms of the median projection at least. And Tyreek Hill should be up there as a top 2 or 3 scorer. Travis Kelce as the number 1 tight end. There shouldn't be really in the median any conjecture about that. It's about, can you find the salary to do it? Is it within the price range? And maybe most importantly, how highly owned is it going to be? Because I talk about median projection, and of course that's nice, but he's not going to hit his median projection every game. There was I think it was the Denver game, the first Denver game to be specific, where it was like an outdoor snowy game, and Travis Kelce was outscored by like one tight end on his own team, and I believe both of Noah Fant and like Albert Okwuegbunam. These crazy things can happen. It's just whether we are betting on it at ownership. I don't think this stack is going to be mega popular because we don't have a ton of crazy value. I think the closest thing we have to crazy value is like a JD McKissick. And I would understand why you could say, well, he's not even hardly a running back. I'm just playing fancy James White. I understand why he's not going to be 25% owned, even though I think he's a good play. So for that reason, without any obvious chalk or like obvious cheap chalk like we had last week across the board, and there was one week where like the optimal cash build was either 2 or 3 punt plays at receiver, without any of that madness going on, I don't think we see more than 10 to 15% ownership on Patrick Mahomes, maybe 15 or so, 15, 20% on Tyreek Hill. They'll both be popular, but I think just generally the construction of this slate is going to be that like people go in a lot of different ways because there's no perfectly obvious plays that let you get up to playing Dalvin and Devontae, Patrick, Tyreek, and Travis Kelce. For that reason, I'm comfortable, not incredibly excited, but comfortable stacking this game. And I think the more interesting thing is how do you run it back? I'm of the opinion that Tua is a decent quarterback. I think from what we've seen from him, he's not incredibly efficient, but he's thrown 6 touchdowns, no interceptions. He has a higher ADOT than Ryan Fitzpatrick, which is kind of completely bucking the trend that people are like, well, Fitzpatrick is the gunslinging deep guy, and Tua is this boring, check down Tom Brady type. He has a higher ADOT. He has a higher deep pass rate. He has a higher rate of throwing past the first down marker. He looks like the more aggressive quarterback, and I think people just are so confirmation bias heavy that Devontae Parker posts a handful of down games with Tua, and they're like, well, it's because he's not a fun quarterback. He's been okay, and he's been aggressive, which is maybe the more exciting thing. I think that puts Devontae Parker in play. I think it's kind of obvious. Devontae Parker plus Kelce and Patrick Mahomes, or Tyreek Hill, Patrick Mahomes, and Mike Gesicki. Those are like the 2 builds I'm comfortable going to. Any interest in like deviations from that for this game?
No, he actually kind of took the words out of my mouth there. I really like the Mahomes-Hill stack. And, I mean, Tyreek Hill has been on an absolute tear as of late. He had that 60 DraftKings points game in Week 12. And last week against Denver, he should have had 2 touchdowns. I remember he caught the touchdown. They called it incomplete. I thought he caught that pass. I'm not sure why they didn't challenge out there. So he should have had a 20-point game again. And he's just getting the targets, 10 targets in Week 13, 15 in Week 12. And he just has so much upside, such a huge ceiling. And Patrick Mahomes has been fantastic all year as well. So I'm really liking that Mahomes, Tyreek Hill stack. Of course, Kelce, he gets it done every single week as well. But like you mentioned, where it's going to get tricky is the run back options for me in specific. I'm kind of with you, but not with you at the same time. I'm more of a Fitzmagic fan. It just gonna hold a place in my heart for a long time. But yeah, Tua is fine. I really do think he is. Parker did have a not so great game last week, only 7.5 DraftKings points, but he's very talented. I do think it's a good matchup. I do think the total's pretty decent as well. So yeah, Parker as a runback option is not bad. So what do you think about Myles Gaskin at 5,600? Last week had 21 touches, 2 targets, 2 receptions, 15.1 DraftKings points in a game that should score decently high here. He's going to get those 20 plus touch upsides at a really cheap price here. So I actually kind of like Myles Gaskin as kind of a run back option, because although they are going to be trailing, I still think he can get some pass catching upside. In week 8, he had 6 targets, week 6, 4 targets, week 5, 5 targets. So I do think that pass catching upside is going to be there.
Yeah, so they had last week at least, they had DeAndre Washington out, Salvon Ahmed out, and Matt Breida, I believe, were out. Salvon Ahmed, DNP. Matt Breida, I believe, is the one that was on the reserve COVID list. He has not been taken off yet. I have no clue what's going on with DeAndre Washington. It's hard to keep track of all of these guys. But if at least 2 of the 3 guys are out, like, there is no way. And specifically, I think Salvon Ahmed is probably the most interesting one, because he was getting basically the Myles Gaskin role when Gaskin was out. If he is back in the lineup, I think maybe they split that role. I would still lean towards Gaskin. If he's out, I almost have no doubts about it that regardless of, Matt Breida, DeAndre Washington, Patrick Laird, Ahmed has been the only one who gives me any pause when Gaskin is in, or potentially when Gaskin is in, because they really haven't played together. If he's out, I think it's wheels up for Myles Gaskin. I think you can even play him despite the fact that they're, I believe, 7.5 point dogs, because I think you're not betting necessarily on that he does well when they're losing by over a touchdown. It's that if they just cover the spread, that means they're playing the majority of the game from within a touchdown. That's not a massive deficit. If they were 10 plus point dogs, I would say, well, you need probably within one standard deviation of like a move from the spread. You need them to cover by a field goal or more to really feel comfortable that they will run the ball throughout the course of the game. All they have to do is cover by 1 point and the game never gets out of hand. Because of that, I think you're simply just placing this 50-50 bet on the spread, and your outcome isn't just, just like betting a spread, isn't just this juiced line. It's that you've built a really viable Patrick Mahomes stack, and you've also filled a running back spot with a cheap but high upside guy. So I think he's probably 3rd on my list of run back options, maybe even actually 2nd with Parker. Because I'm not a fool. I think Ryan Fitzpatrick is like better for this offense. I think we're just exaggerating how much better. I think Parker is hurt by having 2 in the lineup. It's not good for him. It's just not the end of the world. I think he can survive with Tua in the lineup. So for that reason, I'm going to put him like 50-50 between him and Gaskin. Gesicki is my favorite run back. I think that covers everything in this game. It feels like we talked about this game a lot, but it'll be one of my favorite stacking games because of the ever-present upside of Patrick Mahomes. The next game, we have so many. I believe we have 4 games with a 50 or plus point total and 2 that are hanging on that 49.5 border. Chicago versus Houston with 45. Like, the Chicago offense passes a lot, and that's good for volume, and the Houston offense passes like a lot, and they're actually good at it. Those are both good for game environments. But a 45-point total indicates, like, Vegas, I'm not going to try and drastically beat Vegas. I believe that a 45-point total is in the ballpark of correct. With so many good totals, I really hardly even have interest in this game as one-offs. Can you try and sell me on anything you would like to attack in this game?
No, not really. I mean, I was really high on Kiki last week, but they priced him up so much to where I really don't want to pay 5,000 for him at this point. David Montgomery, 6,500. I think he's going to be chalk as well, and they priced him up 1,000 from last week. He did fantastic, 27 DraftKings points. Really don't want to play. Most likely, it's going to be a chalk Montgomery. The matchup's good and all, but man, it's just hard to get on there. The only guy I do want to talk about, I guess, is Chad Hansen. He's really cheap, 3,900. Had a really game last week. They're expecting to activate him from the practice squad again for this week. He did have 7 targets, 5 receptions. Just a pump play at 3,900. Other than that, I really don't see much. I think Mooney's interesting as the cheap pump play, but this is a game I really don't want to touch all that much. Like a 45-point game total, like you mentioned, not all that excited about it.
Yeah, if this were a slate where we had one game at 51, one at 49, and 2 or 3 in that 47 to 48 range, I would say, oh, well, there is a modest but not impossible chance that this game outscores some of those games, and especially when you adjust for salary. We're not looking at just 1 or 2 good games. We're looking at 6, 49 plus games and still more ahead of this. I'm all for getting contrarian and playing games that might not be as appealing because the prices and ownership dictate that if it hits its upside, you're smashing. I don't need to go there this week. There are good, cheap, like there are high total, cheap, and low owned games. I can check all of the boxes, and this game just doesn't check all the boxes. At best, it checks, modest price and modest ownership. But even like you said, like David Montgomery's not going to be on he's going to be popular. I'd imagine we get some ownership on Allen Robinson. This game would have to be completely overlooked for me to really get interested in it. Another game that I kind of feel the same way about, Arizona versus the Giants. Arizona 2-point favorites. The Giants look like they'll be getting back Daniel Jones. It's a 45-point total again. My only lean here is that Kenyon Drake is a 2-point favorite. I know the Giants defense has actually played kind of well, but I mostly look at his volume. He has 20-plus carry upside. Since Kyler Murray hasn't been running quite as much lately, that's actually been seemingly a net positive for Kenyon Drake. He gets some looks in the passing game now and still runs the ball a lot. He's interesting. I think he'll be incredibly low owned is really why I care about him. I think anyone who we can project to see 20 carries and 2 or 3 targets has 25 to 30 point upside. Like it's like what we saw with Joe Mixon early in the year, and even Kenyon Drake at times. They don't play on like the best offenses for their specific role. Like I don't think Kenyon Drake's role is nearly as good as the expensive backs for sure. He's no Austin Eckler, no Derrick Henry, yada yada. He's not as good as those guys, and his role isn't as good. But at his price and at essentially no ownership, I'm fine betting on the volume alone. Difficult matchup be damned.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you say that because I noticed the same exact thing. Like, ever since Kyler Murray has not been Kyler Murray, it looks like Kenyon Drake has really taken over and looked pretty decent as of late. You got about 14 DraftKings points in Week 13, 24 in Week 12, 16 in Week 11. So he's been very, very good. And like you mentioned, 20-plus carry upside at 5,500 at very low ownership. I actually like that quite a bit. I was on him last week as well as in the past couple of weeks, just because I don't know what it is, but since Murray has not been being like as good as he has been, it seems like Drake's really stepping up his game, and it's kind of like what we had expected earlier in the year for Drake when Drake was really bad, but now he's kind of turning it around here. So yeah, I like that call a lot, but other than that, like that's probably all I'm interested in this game, honestly.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's just the same thing we talked about. When we have a full slate of games. I believe this is a 13-game slate, which is the most you get, I think, on any slate. I don't think the Christmas slates or anything get you more games than that. So if we're going to get the full slate of games, we have a ton of alternatives. There's no need to go to a game that's this ugly, because the next game I have, especially on one side, looks like it's going to be unpopular. It's Tampa Bay versus Minnesota, a 51.5-point total, a 29 implied team total from Tampa Bay. That means they're 6.5-point favorites. That 29 implied team total is among the highest on the slate. Yet, and I think I know why, we're not going to see very much ownership on any of these guys. Like the last time I looked, it was Chris Godwin at like 8 to 10% was the highest ownership I saw on the Tampa Bay side specifically. The Viking side is much more condensed. It's easier to predict, so it's going to be more popular. But the Tampa Bay side, people look at this mix of, basically a tied whopper, which is just a split of air yard share and target share between Chris Godwin and Antonio Brown, since Brown has returned to the lineup, or I guess since he's returned to the NFL. And then Mike Evans seeing a little more work than them, but he's also priced up to, I think, 6,600. So you have to pay for that. None of these guys project in the median as great plays. Admitted. I'm not playing for none of them project super well, so I can't play any of them. At the end of the day, if this team puts up 29 points, unless it comes on the ground, and that's relatively unlikely given that they're one of the 5 past happiest teams in the NFL, one of these, if not 2 of these receivers, plus Gronk, are almost certain to have a good day, if not a GPP winning day. We just don't know which one it is, and I think that makes people make their decision of not choosing any of them, when I think in reality, your decision should be, you probably have to choose at least one of them, if not multiple of them in your lineups, given this absurd team total. So for that reason, I'm going to play not only one of them, I'm going to be playing all of them. I'm going to have a lot of Brady lineups, and I'm going to be mixing in double stacks with Brown plus one of the other expensive guys, and single stacks of Godwin or Evans, just with reckless abandon.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of surprising, isn't it, that it's going to be low owned, because this is one of my favorite stacks on the slate. You got Tom Brady, 6,900, and it's just his options are so cheap, like Mike Evans, 6,600, Chris Godwin, 6,300, Antonio Brown, 5,500. It's so easy to get a couple of them in a lineup. Of course, you got Rob Gronkowski, 4,800, who's been playing very, very well as of late, and cheap as well. So this stack is very easy to fit into your lineups. It's not going to completely use all of your salary up. So yeah, I love this stack. And then you got a great matchup against against this Minnesota passing defense that has been pretty bad this year. So I'm all over this Tampa Bay stack. And then the run back options, are fantastic. You got Adam Thielen, Jefferson. I'm probably more on the Thielen side, but I love this stack a lot. Tom Brady, Mike Evans, Godwin Brown, Rob Gronkowski, running it back with Thielen or Jefferson. I like that a lot. But probably one of my favorite stacks of the slate. I'm kind of intrigued that it's not going to be as high as I thought.
Yeah, I think it's simply that people don't have like the sure answer. Like when we play Minnesota, I feel pretty good that I can come within a 50-50 guess of if the passing stack hits, I'm going to get one of the guys. I think I have arguably a 1 in 4 chance when I pick from the Tampa Bay side because they have 3 viable receivers. And as you said, Gronk's playing well. And I think if their team total was like significantly lower, if it was 26, 27, I would say, well, it's not really worth chasing that hypothetical upside, because the upside isn't that they put up 4+ touchdowns, or at least like that's actually not even the upside. That's like the median projection. I feel this way when I look at a team like the Colts. I don't know what's going to happen with the Colts, but even if I get it right, is my upside incredible? Given their team total, it's good, but it's not worth the increased risk that I take on of burning lineups. Like I'm going to have a ton of dead lineups for the Gronk Godwin stacks that don't go off or whatever it happens to be. I'm going to burn a lot of lineups. But if this team like exceeds their team total, they put up 30+ points and this game environment is really good, it will only matter that I gave 20 shots at the roulette wheel and found the right stack, because you will need it to win. On the other side of the ball, I don't have any strong opinions. I think I'm agreeing with you. Adam Thielen, modest, lean. Him and Justin Jefferson are both great. Play whichever one you want. Dalvin Cook, also really good. He's an underdog this week, but if they cover the spread, he's probably fine as well. And given that Christian McCaffrey looks like the much more chalky player above 9K, maybe offers a little bit of leverage there. I think because he's an underdog, though, I'll probably have them ranked in some order of Jefferson and Thielen, and then in third, like the most run back or the third least run back that I'll have will be Dalvin Cook. I don't have any strong takes on the other side of the ball. You know that these guys are good, and there is no hope for a Chad Beebe or an Olabisi Johnson. If Irv Smith sits, I think he can play Kyle Rudolph. If Irv Smith plays, none of them are in play for me. Any weird takes on the Viking side? Otherwise, I feel like they're the easy one to talk about, or mostly just skip over, honestly, because the plays are the plays.
Yeah, like I mentioned, I like Thielen a lot, Jefferson a lot. And as far as Dalvin Cook, I'm actually probably going to be underweight to him or even fade him at 9,400. A really, really bad matchup here against Tampa Bay, whose run defense has been unstoppable, or stopping the run, as you could say there. So probably not going to play much Dalvin Cook, just because I think there's so many better plays with so many better matchups that are going to be lower priced there. But other than that, I'm just going to attack the passing game, honestly.
All right, let's roll into Jacksonville versus Tennessee. Tennessee with another one of these crazy high team totals at 30. It's a 52.5 game total, 7.5 spread in favor of the Titans. This is kind of another game that I feel, for the most part, the plays are the plays. Tennessee the same way, where they run heavy, but they also pass at a crazy efficiency rate. Like their yards per attempt, their touchdown rate are all quite nice. And their target share is incredibly condensed. We're not even going to have Adam Humphries. You really have 2 pass catching options in terms of receivers, and their tight ends, if again, exactly the same. If Jonnu Smith comes back, I'm probably not really interested in either of the tight ends. And if he doesn't come back, Anthony Ferguson is still in play. That's the exact same story as with the Vikings guys. And then the receivers are the same way, although Corey Davis, given his price, he's still in that 5K range, is simply the better value, I think, given that their roles, his and A.J. Brown's, are kind of converging. Like, I still think A.J. Brown's the number 1 receiver. I'm not going to go off the deep end, but their roles are a lot closer than I think the A.J. Brown stands would be comfortable with. So I think in terms of pricing, Corey Davis the better play. If you want to get very contrarian, A.J. Brown doesn't seem like he'll be that highly owned because he doesn't get a ton of targets. He hasn't even hit 10 targets once this season, but he's so efficient that he only needs 8 or 9 to get there. So I think he's okay. I don't love him because I don't like paying for that little of a role, but he'll be contrarian. I think he's good leverage off of Derrick Henry and off Corey Davis.
Yeah, so I had the Tannehill, Corey Davis, and Ferguson stack last week. It worked out fantastic. Corey Davis was like 5% owned in my single entry. That's not going to be the case this week, but it was nice. He scored 38 DraftKings points, had himself a day. And you mentioned, Corey Davis has been fantastic as of late, and you're getting a huge savings going from Brown to Corey Davis. So, I think it's really interesting, and I think it's interesting a lot of weeks too. First of all, Derrick Henry is going to be extremely chalky, probably one of the highest owned running backs this week. If you want to get off of that Derrick Henry chalk like I did did last week and, play a Ryan Tannehill stack to get a little bit different there. I think the stacking options are fantastic. A.J. Brown, like you mentioned, Corey Davis a little bit cheaper. And then, if Junior Smith does not play, Ferksker at 3,600 is going to be the move there. Other than that, on the flip side, James Robinson, it's probably a dude I'm going to keep playing until they price him up where I can't play him anymore. 7,500. He's going to get 20 plus upside. It doesn't matter if they're going to be coming from behind. He's going to get pass catching upside as well. And the matchup is really good for James Robinson also. But yeah, Derrick Henry is somebody you really can't ignore. 8,700 just because of how great the matchup is against this Jaguars defense. And it's all about the game script really for Henry. Like if they're out front, that's when you want to play Henry. But if you think they're going to be coming from behind, then that's when you don't want to play Henry. So I think in this game, they're probably going to be out ahead. If I had to take a guess there, in 8,700, they're probably going to pound the ball. And you can't really ask for a better matchup here against Jacksonville.
On the other side, I only have like one question. What is our level of excitement for DJ Chark? Like, I think a splash game from DJ Chark, one, is always in the range of outcomes, but two, like we've seen Tennessee before give up big games. Do you have any interest in stacking, like doing a Derrick Henry? Derrick Henry gets up early and just they continue to pound the rock. And that means on the other side, Mike Glennon has to keep chucking it down the yard. And you get a little DJ Chark, Derrick Henry secondary stack. Any love for that?
Yeah, I do for sure because of how not so great Tennessee's pass defense has been. And like you mentioned, if they are going to be coming from behind, they are going to be passing the ball. And Chark is a very talented wide receiver. Hasn't done much of as of late, so that could lower the ownership. But definitely something to look at there for sure. I like it.
All right, let's hop into our next game, and I don't think we're spending long here. It's Cincinnati versus the Dallas Cowboys. Dallas are inexplicably 3-point favorites. It only took facing, assumedly, Brandon Allen for that to happen. A 42-point total. This might be the worst total on the slate. I don't hate Giovanni Bernard. I believe he's 5K, and Joe Mixon has basically, I don't know, I think it was Zach Taylor said he won't be playing this week, so he's been ruled out. Gio should have, the bulk of the carries locked down against a terrible, terrible, terrible Dallas rushing defense. But he's an underdog. His team has a sub-20 implied team total. It will be a sprinkling of him at best. Any love for, like, anything. If you can give me anything that you like in this game, I'll take it, because I think it's one of the least appealing games outside of either running back is fine. I think Ezekiel Elliott as a favorite versus the Bengals also makes some sense. I just think because even as a favorite, his team total is fairly low. There are plays on the slate around the same price range that I'd rather go to. Any love for anything here?
I mean, not really. Like you mentioned, like there are so many great games to target on this slate. We have a 13-game slate that it really makes like literally no sense. I mean, outside of getting really different to go to a 42-point slate or game slate there, and then or point game slate. Or I can't talk, but anyway, Michael Gallup at 3,800 is the only guy I do want to touch on. He's getting some decent amount of targets: 11 in week 13, 8 in week 12, 5 in week 11, 7 in week 9. So the targets are there for Gallup. He's extremely cheap, 3,800. Really good matchup against Cincinnati. So that's probably the only spot I go just because he's cheap. It allows you to get other spots in your lineup. Other than that, don't really have any interest in the Bengals at all on the side. I don't really have an interest in Zeke at all. And this is probably going to be like mostly a pass game outside of maybe a couple Gallup shares.
Yeah, I like the big slates like this because I think like spots like a Dallas versus this Cincinnati team have really no chance at outproducing games like the one we talked about with Tampa Bay versus Minnesota. Especially on the Tampa Bay side, that is an affordable stack. Like you are not paying through the roof to get to those guys, but you access such an incredibly high upside relative to this game that like let people tie their own nooses and play these mediocre plays. I will gladly talk more about a larger slate because like one, I'm hardly talking more. We're going to skip this game in about a minute and a half. So I will let people play these plays. And if they hit a true ceiling outcome where this game ends up, going for 55 points, so be it. I think given the ownership discrepancy between this game and like the Tampa Bay side of things, it is simply not wide enough. It would have to be a lot wider for me to ever consider getting down to this game. So, and that's kind of the story with a handful of games on this slate, including this next one isn't actually as bad. It's the Carolina Panthers versus the Denver Broncos. It has a 47 total. The Panthers are 3.5-point favorites. The obvious call here is Christian McCaffrey. Anytime he's hanging around under 10K, you have to consider him. I know the last time we saw him, we got the rap sheet report that he would come back to a limited role, splitting it with Mike Davis. I believe he saw 18 carries and 10 targets. So good work, Ian Rappaport. You really nailed that one again. You can hang that one in your trophy case along with the Jalen Hurts call. Brilliant. I think, assuming McCaffrey plays, which he did pop up with like a thigh injury as well. I think it was like quad or something. That's frustrating. Assuming he does play, I still don't have many concerns. If he fits into my lineup, I'll go there. Otherwise, he doesn't like. I honestly have no interest in the Broncos side. Like Jerry Jeudy bottomed out with 1 catch last week. Tim Patrick scored twice, but he only did it on 4 catches. You could do it with Noah Fant because I think tight end is so miserable that anytime you can correlate it with one of your plays, go for it. It makes more sense than not correlating it. But the Broncos side is so bad that I have really no interest. If DJ Moore and Curtis Samuel don't come off the reserve COVID list, I probably even have more interest in both Christian McCaffrey and Robbie Anderson. But outside of that, I don't know, 50-50 scenario. It seems like a lot of these guys, especially when they get put on early in the week, if they're negative tests, they come back. We've seen it with like Stafford, Ben Roethlisberger, a handful of guys. That's the case. I don't have any interest in any of the pass catchers. It's just wherever Christian McCaffrey fits, I put him in.
Yeah, I'm basically the same way. Like, we got to look throughout the week if Moore and Samuel are going to be out. Pretty much Robbie Anderson and Christian McCaffrey smash spot there. So definitely got to look out for that. We will be talking about that on the Sunday show. So, yeah, I'm kind of with you on McCaffrey. I remember playing him when he did come back. He scored 37 DraftKings points. I think he was like 5% ownership because of that Rappaport report there. So thank you for that. And I was able to play him there. And I don't think he's going to be like 5% owner or anything like this week. I'm kind of curious to hear what the ownership's projected to be. But yeah, he has that really big upside. One of the high ceilings for running backs on the slate here. The matchup, not the best matchup, but it really does not matter who McCaffrey plays. He's going to have an elite ceiling. So yeah, 9,200. I still don't hate it. I will be going to him for sure, especially if Moore and Samuel are out.
Yeah, I believe if you subscribe to Football Diehards, we should have our ownership up within the next day or two. That's kind of the crux of what we're always talking about on these DFS shows. Is so much of our decisions are just based on what we believe the field is going to do. And same thing with Christian McCaffrey. If he came back to 30% ownership, I'd probably be saying, well, he cropped up with that thigh injury in the middle of the week. The game is boring. I'm not going to play him. If he comes back with 7% ownership like he did last time, I think it was even less, I'm probably playing a lot of McCaffrey. I think he's going to come in somewhere around 20% owned. So I think he's fine. I really don't have a strong stance on him. He's going to be middle owned. That's high, but it's not untenable. His price is high, but not untenable because of how good he is. All of my McCaffrey interest is simply if my lineup allows it. The next game we have is Las Vegas versus the Indianapolis Colts. It's a 2.5-point spread in favor of the Colts, a 51.5-point total. Of all of the games, and I briefly touched on this earlier, of all of the games that are high totaled, this is the one I have about the least interest in. I don't know. I mean, if T.Y. Hilton ends up going on to get double-digit targets for the next few games, I will look back and say, I missed something in this game. I should have bought in more to the recent T.Y. Hilton performances. I'm kind of fine running that risk. We have essentially two games. I mean, they are the 2 most recent games, but 2 good games the entire season from T.Y. Hilton. And really, this was the first time he did it on impressive volume. It was 5 targets 2 weeks ago. I believe 10 or 11 targets this most recent week. Topped 100 yards. I believe he scored as well. Those are all really good. And like I said, if he continues to do this, I will, I'll chastise myself for not having seen it coming. I just can't buy into this 2-game sample after we saw for the bulk of the season, he was dreadful. He was completely dreadful. Because of that, I don't really have any confidence in my ability to pick which of the Colts players are going to have a good game. Some weeks it's Michael Pittman, but his target volume isn't good. Could it be Zach Pascal? Could it be a tight end, which they have 3 of? Could be any one of them. I feel like my confidence in picking these guys is so low, and the ceiling is not the same as it is for, the Tampa Bay players or some of the other ambiguous situations. So I don't have a ton of interest in this game. Of all the, good totals, this is probably the one I fade. Darren Waller at his price, I'll probably just always pivot to Travis Kelce because he's nearly 7K.
Yeah, I'm definitely with you here. Not all that interested. Hilton has been fine the last 2 games. We got to look at the whole season. He's been awful as a whole. Waller, I'm kind of disappointed because, man, I was all in on him. Week 12 against Atlanta, the dude scored 6.3 DraftKings points. Week 13, didn't play him. He scored 48 DraftKings points. Come on, was 1 week too early on that one. So that kind of sucks. But yeah, I have no interest in this game, really. I think Jonathan Taylor's kind of interesting. Decent matchup against the Raiders here. He did have 13 targets or 13 carries last week, 3 targets, 3 receptions, 16 total touches. In week 11, he did have 22 carries, 4 targets, 4 receptions. So I do think the upside's there, the matchup's there for Taylor, the price is there, and probably low ownership as well. But other than that, I'm going to pass on this game for sure.
Yeah, Taylor was the one name I was going to throw out before we hopped off this game, so I'm glad you hit it. It's just that if he returns to, especially we saw 2 weeks, or maybe it was 3 weeks ago for him, two games ago though for Taylor, that 20 plus carry upside, I think that still exists. That gives him, it's the same argument we make with Kenyon Drake, especially in this case. I think I'll have to check, but I'm fairly sure that the Indianapolis Colts have a higher implied team total, and they're favored as well. So you have the potential to capture a lot of points by playing a Jonathan Taylor. I won't go crazy on him, but I think given his team situation, being favored, high implied team total, he's certainly worth chasing for that, 20, 120 and one touchdown upside, maybe even multiple touchdown upside. So he's the only real play I have any love for. That's about it for this game. I'm going to move on to Seattle versus the Jets. A 46-point total that is currently dropping. It's dropped by a point, and a 13.5 spread in favor of Seattle. If this were week 7, I would be, I'd be jamming in all of my Seahawks, because this matchup, especially the passing matchup, is really where the Jets have been burned. Oh, I don't know. Maybe that time they gave up a last play Hail Mary to Henry Ruggs by blitzing like 7 players. Maybe that's an indication of how terrible their passing defense is. And the run defense is actually not bad. PFF has them as like a top 5 run defense. Teams beat them. They just beat them through the air. Seattle doesn't necessarily want to beat teams through the air anymore. They started off the season through 7 weeks, number 1 in the NFL in pass rate over expectation. Meaning even when you adjust for the situations that they were in, meaning, they were typically winning, you don't pass as often when you're winning, they were passing at a higher rate than we would expect them, by a lot. So much so that they were the pass heaviest team when you adjust for those situations. Since then, it's come back down. They're still in the top 10, but it's concerning that after seeing Russ cook, Pete Carroll's like, nah, wave, no more of that. I don't think this is the death of letting Russ cook, but am I concerned that it will continue to be scaled back, especially in a game where they're nearly 2 touchdown favorites? I'm a little concerned. Where are you at on the scared about Russell Wilson meter?
Yeah, I'm definitely scared as well, because since they're such big favorites, if they get out ahead, probably not going to see as much upside, as much volume from Russell Wilson. But to get out ahead, you got to get there, you got to score touchdowns, and I do think that's going to happen here. I do think it could be possibly decently owned here, especially on the Seattle side. And you got a good stacking options. DK Metcalf 8,400, probably low ownership, stacked with Russell Wilson. I like that stack a ton. And the run back options are actually kind of decent in a game that they should be trailing. There's going to be a lot of passing on the side of the Jets. Denzel Mims, somebody I really like at 4,100. Perriman's been decent. Crowder had 2 touchdowns last week. I think they're all fine. Preferably, I'd probably go Mims just at that price. But I'm kind of intrigued by the Russell Wilson Metcalf stack there. Don't know if I'd touch Lockett. Man, Lockett's been so bad the past couple weeks, but I'm really liking Metcalf. I know he's really expensive, but that should lower the ownership. So that's some way I'm looking at it.
Just touching on some news that we have on the Jets side, I haven't gotten any update or seen any update on Frank Gore, who left week 13 with a concussion. If he doesn't play, we got 22 carries and I believe 2 targets, both of which were caught from Ty Johnson. I know they're massive underdogs, but if they just cover this spread, it has to happen by a lot. So I think it is a small chance. But given what we are currently seeing from Russell Wilson, the Seahawks, if they do get up to a massive lead, it's possible that they end up running the ball a lot. And they haven't run the ball particularly efficiently anyway, so that wouldn't be good for the offense. So ideally, you want the Jets to stay in the football game like they did with the Raiders. They were winning that game up until the final seconds. That would it did last week, and maybe it would again this week bode well for Ty Johnson. I'm a little concerned with these Russell Wilson stacks, though, so it's not really a place I'm getting too much. I think it's interesting. And then Denzel Mims left the team for personal reasons. I think it was a family matter that he had to leave for. They don't know if he's going to play this week. If he doesn't play, Brashad Perriman would probably take over the bulk of that field stretching role. Denzel Mims kind of took that from him since joining the team with he was out early in the season with hamstring injuries. Since he joined the team, he's kind of taken that job away from Brashad Perriman. Perriman gets it back. He's like a clear value, just, regardless of the situation, this game having a good or bad game environment. And obviously it's the ideal run back. So those are just news updates we will have to wait on to get to. The next game is awful. This is the one, actually, of all the games, I haven't. There's one good play. It's Washington versus San Francisco, a 3-point favored San Francisco team, 43.5 points. We saw Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson split carries, and they gave Jeff Wilson goal line work. That immediately rules him out for me because the team doesn't have a great total. Washington is 3-point underdogs. They will not be with Antonio Gibson this week. J.D. McKissick is top 10 in targets overall since Alex Smith took over. It was like the first quarter he took over 5 or 6 weeks ago. It's top 10 in targets overall, including wide receivers, tight ends, whatever. And Antonio Gibson is out, who maybe was going to push him for some receiving work. That's interesting. He's only, I believe, 4,900. I don't love it. I don't love when my running backs really only do one thing. but when they do it so well, I'm actually a little interested. So McKissick is cheap, good value. The game script sets up well for him as essentially a receiver. Outside of that, I have no real interest in this game. It's one of the worst totals. Maybe Terry McLaurin, because you can always play Terry McLaurin. His volume is so good that his quarterback play doesn't really matter. The opponent doesn't really matter. Sort of Allen Robinson-esque in that way. That'd be fine. I'm not probably going to do it, but I could see. Any interest in anything in this game for you?
Yeah, I mean, probably McKissick, since Gibson's going to be out, McKissick's going to be on the field a ton, and the dude has so much target upside. I mean, in week 10, he had 15 targets, so just for that reason, I think it's like a nice floor. Don't really know much about the ceiling, but I do like the floor for him, and other than that, like, there's really nothing. I think both tight ends are interesting if you wanted to go there, but I do think there's some better options on the slate, but pretty much it's McKissick for me and move on.
Yep, McKissick for me and move on. The next game we have is the Los Angeles Chargers versus the Atlanta Falcons. This game total is at 49.5. We have the Falcons as 2.5-point favorites. It feels weird because I think of the Chargers as a good team. I know their offense instinctively. When I think of their offense, I think touchdowns. I think lots of PPR value, yardage, all of these awesome things. And somehow it never translates into wins because their coach is a donkey. So this game should be a fun back and forth shootout because both defenses are bad. The Chargers play at one of the fastest paces in the league, and they have an incredible quarterback. So I think as an underdog, they look like a really attractive team. Their targets are also fairly condensed. Keenan Allen gets a ton of looks. Austin Eckler gets a ton of looks. Hunter Henry and Mike Williams, I think, have been kind of hurt by the presence of Austin Eckler in these past 2 weeks, none of whom have really posted like huge games by any means. I think they're fine as secondary pieces of a stack if you want to go Keenan, Hunter Henry, Justin Herbert, I get it. And on the other side, I think there are 3 viable plays. It's Julio Jones because he's 6,600, and anytime he's under 7K, you really have to consider playing Julio Jones. We just know the history of Julio Jones, which is a very large sample for NFL standards, says that he has massive game-breaking upside, and he has at least a few big games this year that proves that is still in there, up until last week at least, unlike T.Y. Hilton, who also had a good history, but we really hadn't seen anything. We know it's inside of Julio still. His value is really good. I think the only concern is that I believe 6,600, his ownership is going to be top 5 to, top 10 on the slate. Calvin Ridley, if you are building like just the chalky Justin Herbert plus Keenan Allen, is maybe the leverage play off of Julio. If you get a little weird and go, Hunter Henry, or I guess Mike Williams would be another great example. If you went Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, Justin Herbert, you've built yourself a very unique stack. I think you're fine running with the Julio Jones as the more popular run back. Is there anything different? Oh, I guess the third player is Hayden Hurst. He saw 4 targets last week and only caught 1 of them. I only like him because he correlates Justin Herbert. Other than that, I probably won't have any of him like in non-Justin Herbert or Matt Ryan lineups. Anything interesting on the Falcons side? I feel like the Chargers side, both of these sides are kind of set. They just have very clean distributed targets.
Yeah, so I'm actually really surprised by that total of 49.5 because you mentioned it, both defenses are really bad and both offenses have some upside. So I do think this has potential to be a shootout. And I like the Chargers side a lot. I like the Chargers stack. I like that they did very bad last week. I do expect them to bounce back and score more than 0 points. And you get such a much better matchup here against Atlanta, who I do love attacking through the air here. And Herbert, 6,100, I like him a lot. You can pair him with Keenan Allen, Hunter Henry, somebody I like a lot at 4,400. Austin Eckler, somebody that screwed a lot of people last week, including me, kind of stopped me from getting a takedown. I'm going back to Austin Eckler this week against Atlanta, who does struggle, against running backs that are able to catch the ball, and Eckler can do just that. And the dude got 9 targets last week, 16 targets this week he returned. The only concern I have was seeing him split carries with Balaj. That was not great to see, but I still think he has that pass catching upside, 10 target upside. And running it back, like you mentioned, Julio Jones, like, man, that's so cheap, 6,600 for somebody with the upside of Jones. I think it's a fantastic run back option, but like you mentioned, he's going to be very high owned. So why not get a little different? Go with Calvin Ridley, who's going to be 900 more expensive and probably like half the ownership as well. So I think there's so many ways to attack this game, and probably one of my most intriguing games to play personally, because I do think the over is going to hit. To see this only being like a 49.5 point game total with the offenses and the defenses being very bad here. So yeah, I really like this game, and I really like that Chargers stack.
All right, I like it. Let's get into our next game, and it's the final good game of the slate. It is Green Bay versus Detroit. Green Bay with, I believe, it has to be the highest team total of the slate at 31.5. They're 7.5 point favorites. In this game, a 55.5 point total. On the Green Bay side, again, it's kind of obvious, as we've talked about with some other teams, Davante Adams gets so much work that it's more of if you're stacking Davante Adams completely off the radar. I believe it's back-to-back games without a catch from Marquez, but it looked like Allen Lazard had a small edge. He seems to have maximized that edge. Marquez Valdes-Scantling kind of just drawing dead to have a big game. Allen Lazard, if he's going to be on the field for a majority of Aaron Rodgers dropbacks, I think he's interesting. And he needs to score so from playing other really good plays. Same thing goes for Davante Adams. For that reason, I think I'll be pivoting to a decent amount of Aaron Jones this week. He hit last week. Davante hit last week. I think sort of when you look at this team, my objective is going to be in nearly all of my lineups, have some piece of this game. It's going to be a little bit of Tunyon, a little bit of Lazard, probably a lot of Aaron Jones.